Welcome to the Play Sheet Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Tyler Jackson, and we're going to recap week one of football season, all the best action, and we're going to preview what we have coming up for week two, some of the best games, some of the storylines to keep in mind. Before that, we're going to hear a word from our sponsors, and when we get back to that, we'll dive right into it.
For the past 4 decades, Princeton Healthcare Center has provided a quality experience for countless families to give them a warm and safe senior living environment. We're much more than a nursing home, offering skilled nursing services in a long-term care community. If you're looking for a skilled nursing facility that is as compassionate as it is comprehensive, look no further. Contact us today to schedule a tour for you or your loved one. Princeton Healthcare Center, a commitment to caring.
Back here on the Play Sheet Sports Podcast, I'm your host, Tyler Jackson, the owner and publisher of PlaySheetSports.com. And boy, we got a great week one slate of games. I had the chance to get out the two games this past week, Thursday and Friday, and I'll go ahead and open with this. I encourage any team, if you can get a Thursday or Saturday game on your schedule, go ahead and do that. You get to be the center of the universe essentially for that week. You get your own standalone game. It's kind of like prime time. And I think the Independence Herbert Hoover game on Thursday, which we'll get into in a minute, I think that kind of illustrated that. There was actually so much media there that the scoreboard blew out because I think there were so many people on it, is what they said. So the fourth quarter of that game and half of the third quarter was played without a clock, with the referees were keeping track of it on the field. So, but it was just that one was a marquee matchup. It had two of the top teams in the state. The Class AA number two in Independence, Class AAA number three, and the state runner-up from a year ago in Herbert Hoover. So it had a little bit of everything. It was super exciting. So we had the opportunity to go there, and I'll go ahead and start with that one. And wow, what a game, 37-34. For those that are unfamiliar, last year these two teams played up at Herbert Hoover. Independence took a 16-point halftime lead, ended up losing the game 37-30, and a lot of the similar stuff happened this time around. Independence went up 30-7 in the first half, and then Hoover stormed back and ended up leading 34-30 at one point. Then Independence was able to come back, take the lead, and hold on to it. Well, they won 37-34. But the thing that really stood out to me about this game, and it's probably ad nauseum at this point, but Independence's defensive line really dominated that game. They had 8 sacks. Really one of the best defensive line performances that I've ever seen at the high school level. It kind of reminded me of, and this is just a shameless Eagles plug here, but it reminded me of the last live football game I saw, the Super Bowl, where a great pass rush just that kind of nukes an offense. And Hoover was able to get some stuff going. They still ended up scoring 4 offensive touchdowns, and it was a really exciting game. They held up their end for a lot of it. But whenever your quarterback is under siege like that, it's hard to do much. And Independence brought the heat most of the night. They had a strip sack that led to a fumble recovery touchdown. Really, it was just a great game. Really enjoyable as a neutral spectator. I'm sure that Hoover fans and Independence fans were on the edge of their seats the entire time. But I do kind of want to dive into that pass rush a little bit. Man, what a game for Isaiah Conley, 3.5 sacks. But it wasn't just Conley. He was able to help get matchups for some of his teammates. Alex Blankenship had a good game. Landon Riddle had a sack. Landon Phelan I had him splitting a sack with Isaiah Conley, and he had an interception. Really, it just felt like it was a complete team effort victory. Caden Bradbury had an interception, and he had a huge catch. On fourth and two, and another on a third down conversion early in the game. And that was after he fumbled a kickoff return. So really a great game for him. Silas Nelson had a pick six, had 90 yards rushing. Brock Green threw 2 touchdowns. A fourth down touchdown run, and threw that fourth and two pass to Caden Bradbury. Great performance by the quarterback. Offensive line did not give up a single sack, which I thought was a really interesting metric. I know coming in, the staff that was kind of the younger part of the roster. They had a lot of kids on that offensive line, so they're curious to see how they would fare. They didn't give up a single sack. I thought that's extremely encouraging against one of the better teams on Independence's schedule. So you got to give the offensive line their props. But KJ Vyers is a freshman. First game coming out, 100 yards for receiving, putting everyone on notice like, hey, we have two legitimate wide receivers. And that was another takeaway from this game is for everything that Independence was able to do to win this game, they didn't get much out of Christian Linksweiler, who I think is one of the best, if not the best wide receiver in Double A. He had some drops. They weren't able to connect with him. He had a fumble that went out of bounds. Really frustrating night for him. But I can't even imagine what this offense is going to look like whenever they are able to get him clicking. But just so many good players that had good nights. It was legitimately one of those nights where if you were doing a player of the game, you'd have 7 or 8 kids to choose from, and I think that's exactly what Independence is hoping for. Just a guy like each night, somebody can carry the slack for us, somebody can do it, and I think that's exactly that was my takeaway from this game is that Independence has those guys. And I felt like the Patriots hit a growth spurt. Obviously, they went through a lot last year, but to be able to yield the lead in this game and to come back and still win it, I thought it spoke volumes about where they were as a team. And Isaiah Conley, I talked to him after the game, and he even said, hey, it did kind of pop in our heads a little bit. This happened to us last year. We might be losing this game, but Independence they were able to rally. And that's a fun Hoover team too. They have a lot of new pieces. They had some transfers in. The quarterback's new. They have a wide receiver as well to transfer in, replacing some offensive line pieces. So they've got a lot of moving parts, but I think that's definitely a team that as the season goes on, they'll get a lot better. Still be in that AAA playoff picture and title picture, provided they can put it all together. That I've seen teams fall apart after a good start to the season. It can be hard to balance that, but I think they're definitely going to be a fun team to watch. If I was a Hoover fan, I wouldn't be too discouraged. I think they just lost to a really good Independence team. Uh, but it doesn't get any easier for Independence, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. But extremely exciting. That's a great way to start the season. And with as difficult as Independence's schedule is, they needed to get points where they can. I think Hoover's going to get them a lot of points. I think at worst, they're an 8-2 team in AAA. You're going to get a lot of points from that game from Independence, and each week for them is a battle. And I truly believe that Independence is the best team in AA whenever they play up to it and they're healthy. I don't know that anybody else can stop them. And even looking at this past weekend's results, I kind of feel even more strongly about that. I think that they're head and shoulders above the pack. I think there's a team that could push them just because of the nature of their matchups, and we'll get into that later. But as of right now, they looked every bit the part of a title favorite. But again, we still have what is this week one, and you got to win 14 games, I believe, in order to hoist that state championship trophy. So 13 games to go, a lot can happen. But to be able to get out of this game healthy and to be able to get out with a victory, that's an extremely encouraging sign for the Patriots. And I want to move over to the other team. I think that could maybe push them if there is a chance in Double A. And I think that's Bluefield. I thought Bluefield grew up a lot. Now, for those that haven't followed over the last couple of years, Bluefield has started the season, 1-4. It's been hard to start the season fast because their early schedule is so difficult. That didn't change this year. They opened with Graham again. Graham's the defending, I believe, Class 2 VHSL state champions. They've built quite a program up there. One that's super respectable. I think that since 2017 they've won 3 state championships. So just a great pedigree, great program. It doesn't matter how good or bad these teams are. This game is always competitive. But Bluefield came out like gangbusters and just jumped them. They were up 20-3 in the first half. Offense really cooled off. I think I had them for, I believe it was about 30 yards of total offense in the second half. So it may not have even been that, but things cooled off quite a bit from. But the defense never relented. The defense had 4 turnovers, 2 interceptions. There was a fumble on special teams, and then there was a strip sack, I believe. Uh, so yeah, I thought the defense played extremely well, and but I don't want to take too much away and too much into this, and I'll talk about this a little bit later. But overall, this is a very young Bluefield squad. The quarterback's still only a sophomore, Max Simpson. Pax Calhoun, who really had a breakout game. We'll see if he can carry it. I've seen kids have breakout games in game one and not be able to parlay that into success the rest of the regular season. We'll see if he can do that. But 2 touchdown catches, beat his man and one-on-one coverage. So he had 2 touchdown catches. He had an interception. He had a fumble recovery. Just had a nose for the ball wherever it was. He was there. Only a sophomore. Looked to be probably about a 6'2", 6'3" wide receiver. Had good connection with Simpson and Tylee Simon as well. Tylee Simon had a nice interception against Graham. Uh, but again, one thing that I warn about with this is turnovers are not a sustainable metric. That's proven at all levels. It's really hard to depend on turnovers. And I don't think we can go without acknowledging that Graham had some mistakes. There were, I'd say, probably about 6 or 7 passes that they had that were open and dropped. They just couldn't haul it in. Passes that you'd probably expect and they just weren't able to get it done. One kid that I really did like for them, though, was Douglas Palmer, the kid that came in and played quarterback for them. I thought that he looked good when he got in. There were some snap issues, but I think he's a good athlete. He's going to be a really good player for them. Their roster had him listed as a freshman. He's going to be dangerous. So, Graham fans, that's definitely a kid that you're going to want to watch. But Bluefield, at the end of the day, you got to make the plays, and that's exactly what they did. They were able to churn out some clock. I thought that defensively, their defensive line was small, but they were quick. They were able to get pressure and convert that into sacks at different times. And again, the interceptions. Offensively, I thought they did a good job taking care of the ball. I thought they struggled to run it at times, but they are still extremely young up front. They were able to rip off some explosive plays with Willis Wilson, and I think even their other running back, Jeremiah Jones, is that's a really good thunder and lightning combination. A little bit younger version of I don't want to say this don't use it lightly, but reminds me somewhat of Mookie Collier and Chuck Edwards, just how they're able to switch up the pace a little bit. But I was super impressed, and I this was a game where I shot it on the sidelines, so I was able to you're able to pick up some more things. I thought there was a little bit more accountability. I thought the players were trying to hold each other more accountable. They're trying to hold the coaches more accountable. There were still some issues with delay of games, which has kind of been a common thing for Bluefield in these first couple of weeks, going back over the last 2 or 3 years. They had four delay game calls on punts, and there were a couple times where they had to take a timeout in order to get the play call in. But overall, I thought it was really encouraging. First game out, it can be hard to get things down exactly, but I thought Max Simpson played really well. There was one where he threw it up, and ball probably should have been picked off, but overall, ball placement was great. There were a couple times where it looked like Graham was cheating up on some of their shorter routes, trying to intercept the ball. They just weren't able to get it done. Simpson was able to beat them to the punch. But I thought the way the game plan worked, throw short to open up deep, worked really well. And this was a good quality win for the Beavers because, like I talked about with Independence, Bluefield has a very difficult schedule. You start with Graham, who will count for AAA points in the win column. And now you have to go to Princeton, another AAA semifinalist who handed you one of the worst losses in program history a year ago, which that's why I'm impressed by the defense. But okay, do it again because last year they held Graham to 10 points before Graham went on to win a state championship, and then Princeton was able to dice them. So you go over to Honeycutt, and we'll preview that game a little bit later. But you go over to Honeycutt. Let's see if we can sustain that success in week 2. That's what I want to see. I want to see if it translates. Are you able to do it? And if so, then we'll go from there. But this is a when you're playing a schedule like this, getting any win you can, especially a high quality one like this, helps you down the road. I mean, Bluefield was a 4-5 team last year and got to host a playoff game because of how difficult their schedule was. So getting this early win out of the way early, I think is extremely beneficial for a playoff picture. Now you just gotta stay healthy and keep improving, and you know don't buy into your own hype too much. You still got, like I said, with Independence, you still got 13 more games you want to win to get to where you actually want to be. We're going to move on to our probably our biggest rivalry game of the week, one of the biggest ones of the year, and that's Wyoming East and West Side. This one was played at Wyoming East. Really wasn't competitive. West Side with a big win over Wyoming East, and so coming into this game, so before I did the tab preview with West Side, I thought, okay, this might be a pretty competitive game. West Side loses a lot of really good players. Let's see how it goes. Wyoming East brings back some. They lost some players, but they bring back a lot of young players that played last year. And then I talked with Will Daniel, head coach of West Side, and when he was telling me about the players that they had coming back, it's like Cameron York. He's like, we got 3 or 5 starters on the offensive line. I'm like, yeah, well, if you're starting in the trenches and you're bringing back starters there, I like where you're going, even if you're not bringing back the quarterback and what was a big part of your offense. Then it's like, all right, we got a running back that we got back that we like a lot, and Devin Sanders a transfer from Man. So it's like, okay, that's another good veteran piece. And they talked about some of the defensive players they had, and the more they talked, I had kind of greatly overestimated just how much they lost. And yeah, I thought it showed. They were able to come out. They had a lot of success. They really hampered a Wyoming East offense, and For the talent that Wyoming East does have, they're still young. They started a freshman at quarterback, and I know that Westside was starting a sophomore at quarterback, but Braden Waldron's not a normal sophomore. Anybody that's watched him play basketball knows that he's not too, the lights aren't too bright for him. It doesn't matter how good the competition is. I thought he was their best player against Wheeling Central last year in the state semifinal, and that was as a freshman, as their sixth man. So to me, that was like, all right, like the lights aren't too bright for this kid. They're probably going to be okay. And I actually thought I remember seeing him get some snaps against Liberty last year. I thought he looked good as a freshman. It was late in the game. Liberty, I think, had put their JV team in at that point. But I was like, okay, like I feel like this probably is a game that favors West Side more. I didn't see it favoring West Side by about 40 points or so more. I was a little surprised by that. But I wasn't surprised it was a multi-score game. Now for West Side, it's sort of the same thing. Can you keep this? Can you parlay and can you keep parlaying it? You have a big game against Mingo Central coming up this week. You want to be able to build off of that, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. But I think that's a great way for West Side. It's not just that they opened the season with a win, but it's how they won. You never really want to give out style points, but I think it matters. It's like, okay, like we have some continuity here with these kids that are coming back, and we showed it, and it was a very good quality win for us. So, congratulations to West Side, and if you're Wyoming East, you're hoping that these kids can kind of rebound because that's a tough one. It's a tough one to go all off season. That's a big rival for you, and to lose like that is extremely difficult. But the season isn't made in one game. You can go back to, and not saying that Wyoming East is a title contender, but you go back to whenever they won a state championship. Their first game of the season was an overtime win against Jaeger, and then they just completely dominated Double A field. So a season isn't lost in one week, and there's still 9 games to go. And how Wyoming East responds to this will be interesting to see. But we're going to go ahead and take our first break, and when we come back, we'll talk about some more of the games that we had in week one. And after that, we'll get into the week two previews.
Raynell Medical Center is excellent healthcare right at home. Primary care, behavioral health, dental, pharmacy, full service lab, and more. At locations close to you in Raynell, Meadowbridge, Alderson, White Sulphur Springs, Maxwellton, Midland Trail, and Lewisburg. Call 304-438-6188. Raynell Medical Center. Excellent healthcare right at home.
Tyler Jackson at PlaySheetSports.com, and I welcome you back to the PlaySheet Sports Podcast. We're going to go ahead and break down some more of the week one action. And I want to move into James Monroe getting an early win. When I did my preseason poll for Metro News, I had James Monroe as 10, and there were a lot of unknowns with them, replacing the quarterback, replacing Brady Baker. They just had a lot of pieces that they were replacing. And well, not a lot. I'd say they probably had 6 or 7 seniors, but they were all key seniors. You lost Peyton Gardenier, who kicked the 46-yard field goal in a playoff game, and John Must, and special teams are critical. But they lost so many important kids. I didn't know exactly what to expect, and you know, Williamstown was a team that was getting a lot of hype. They were considered a dark horse title contender. I believe they were ranked number 4 coming into the preseason. And James Monroe went into a neutral site and led them 19-0 right off the bat. Now they did end up yielding that lead. I think Williamstown went up 25-26, but James Monroe battled back. They scored on the screen pass on 3rd and 7 to Bryce Gardenier, who's playing football for the first time. Um, and then they held. The defense held Brock Parker with a big field goal block. And James Monroe, to me, falls in very much that same vein as Independence and Bluefield. Now, their schedule isn't quite as tough, but when you adjust, Bluefield and Independence are schools that are right on that AAA cusp. They're bigger AA schools, so they're a little bit more equipped to handle this. James Monroe was a single A team in the three class system, so they're a tad bit smaller. I think their enrollment's probably around 400, 450-ish. So you're probably looking at 150 less students than Independence and Bluefield. But they have a difficult schedule. They play a couple AAA teams. They have Shady Spring. They have Greenbrier East. They have Tug Valley, who was a team that played in the Class A state semifinal a year ago and has turned into a really decent program. So and then Williamstown. And I thought this was a very difficult schedule for James Monroe. And this was always my question coming in. Are there enough wins on that schedule for you guys to get into the playoffs? And just as it's the case of Bluefield Independent, getting this week one win, I don't want to call it a steal because I think that all these teams are talented and they probably, they showed that they deserve to win those games. But for our 3 AA teams, they're now ranked in the top 5 in Metro News' latest poll. to steal those week one games, I think is huge for each program. I think for James Monroe, Ryan Mann, I thought looked good as quarterback. They surrounded him really well. Caden Hines is a superb athlete at receiver. I don't know if he'll shake out that way, but he's looking at being a guy that could be an all-stater in three different sports this year if things keep going the right way. But I liked a lot of what I saw with James Monroe, and this is really the great thing about living in 2025 is you can stream all these games, you can go back, you can live view them. Whereas in 2015 or even in 2010, you basically had to read secondhand what was happening. It was hard to actually get an idea of what you were going to see or what had happened. But I was able to see this, and yeah, I was just extremely impressed by James Monroe. It looked like a John Mustang coach team, and they've had these week one standout performances. 2 years ago, Wheeling Central, they went up there when Wheeling Central had a sense of confidence that they were going to win that game, and James Monroe beat them by multiple scores. So I thought this was a really quality win for James Monroe, and it doesn't get any easier. Again, when we talk about the week two previews. These double A teams, the gauntlet continues. But yeah, for James Monroe, I got to give them their flowers. I definitely ranked them a little bit too low, and I'm curious to see what they can do this week, and we'll talk about that here in a bit. I want to move on to the Beckley offense, which found some balance. They beat Washington 41-20. And this was again one I was really curious about. I've talked about this in some of the pieces that I've written, but Beckley's trying to replace 2,500 yards of offense on the ground. That's extremely difficult to do. These are kids that had played and started. I started for them in some capacity for a couple of years now. You're talking Bryce Ford, all these guys, and it's if you tell anybody, hey, I've lost 2,500 yards of total offense, I need to figure out a way to replace that. Anybody's eyes would open. But Beckley has a bit of an advantage in that they had two receivers coming back, two dynamic, athletes, and AJ Thomas and Preston Clary. But Gage Price did a good job of delivering the ball. I watched a little bit of that game too, and I think they did a good job of marrying what their athletes are good at and what Beckley wants to do. They want to be able to run the ball, and they were effective at doing that with Gage Burdett. But they were able to, okay, we don't have to go under center and do wing T all the time. We were able to live in pistol a little bit more and run the ball a little bit more out of that and get some favorable run looks. And they did that. Gage Burdett ran for almost 200 yards. Gage Price, the quarterback, threw for almost 200 yards. So overall, a very well balanced effort on offense. The thing with Beckley, and this is, I think that they probably say the same thing too. You got to sustain it, and let's see how it goes when the schedule toughens up. The back end of the schedule is brutal. They've started, I believe, 4-1 or 5-1, probably three straight years or so. But then the back end has kind of gotten them a little bit. So we'll see how it goes. But I think this is a solid way to lay the foundation because I know in years past, whenever they've been able to pass the ball with Maddox McMillan, it was like, okay, we're leaning heavy into the pass. And they got to the point, it's like, okay, let's lean heavier into the wing T. So I think this is a good way to balance it all out. And I'm very curious to see how it keeps progressing. I think it'll be a lot of fun. Like I said, anytime your offense is fun, you have dynamic athletes like that, you can get it out to them in space and take deep shots. It's extremely entertaining, and that's exactly what it was for Beckley this past week. And I want to move on to Oak Hill. Cardiac attack for the Red Devils. It's funny because when I talked about Oak Hill last year, there was a lot of the same things. They're winning a lot of close games. There's a lot of coin flip games. And it's always a Nicholas County game. This game is always just super competitive. It's super close for some reason. And I have no idea exactly why that is. But it's usually a good barometer. I come away from this game thinking Oak Hill, Nicholas County is going to be okay. It's tough because they're in AAA. But their star showed out. Colton Helms, I thought, statistically, it looked like he played well. This is a game I didn't see too much of. I saw some highlights. Devin Nash ran for almost 150 yards, and Nicholas County had a chance to win. I think there was a throw there towards the end of the game where it just fell incomplete. They could have had a completion that would have gotten them down into the red zone. They just weren't able to connect. But for Oak Hill, kudos. I don't know what it is about Devon Marion and his teams, but they just find a way to win, and that was the case again. Breaking in a new quarterback too, Luke Endicott, 2 touchdown passes, ran for another touchdown, and it was impressive. I saw some of the balls he threw. There was one to Owen Gross. I was like, man, that's a great ball. And then the decisive score to Carson Treadway. That was another great one. Just chucked it. And this was his first start. He didn't play last year. He had played JV the year before, but he put on 10 to 15 pounds of muscle. Devon Marion, head coach of the Red Devils, told me before the season started. He said, we're excited about him. He's worked really hard for this, and I thought it showed. He looked like the guy early that, hey, we want the ball in his hands. We feel confident in him. I think this is, winning the way they did is such a massive confidence boost for a quarterback. I don't want to call him a young quarterback, but I would say inexperienced, first varsity start. But to be able to, Oak Hills brings back a lot of athletes that they're able to surround him with. But it's not just like, hey, throw this ball into space and let the athletes do it. No, he was throwing balls and expecting his guys to make plays downfield, and he was putting it in positions for them to do so. So I came away from this one, kind of feeling the same way I did about Oak Hill last year. Somehow you guys just kind of find a way to win. And I think too much that I boil it down to, oh, you're winning close games. This isn't a skill, but there's some sort of skill to doing it, to being able to stay calm, to being able to stay composed in those situations. And whatever Devon Marion's doing in Oak Hill seems to work and seems to be impressioning on his kids pretty well. We're gonna go ahead and take a break, and when we come back, we'll go ahead and look ahead to some of the week two matchups, and there are quite a few ones.
Some see sports as just a game, but it's more than that. It's about building dreams, embracing teamwork, and pushing limits. With every play, every cheer, we're there rooting as partners in their journey. Because at First Community Bank, we believe the youth of today shape our communities tomorrow.
Back here on the Play Sheet Sports Podcast, I'm your host, Tyler Jackson. We're going to go ahead and preview the Week 2 matchup, some of the games to really keep an eye on, especially based on the Week 1 results. The first one I want to start off with is Princeton and Bluefield. I didn't hit too much on Princeton's victory over Capital, but I do want to hit on it a little bit here. Princeton came in. I thought their defense from the part of the games I was able to gather, I wasn't able to watch the game in its entirety. Uh, but from what I watched, I was super impressed with what they were able to do defensively. I was curious because you're going from a 4-man down to a 3-man down front, and the reason I was interested in that is because I think Caleb Kaiser is one of the best defensive players in the state. But now he's not playing on the line of scrimmage. He's playing in a role that's completely different to him. It's kind of foreign to him. I think it takes some of his best skill sets, and I don't want to say this diminishes him, but he's not getting after the quarterback every play. He has a bunch of different responsibilities. Instead of being an attack player, he's more of a read and react player now. And I liked him so much as an attack player, but it worked really well. They were able to hold down a Capital offense that has some really good players, including an all-state running back in David Robinson. He was a player that burned them a little bit last year, especially as a receiver. But coming in, they'll get a test against this Bluefield team. And for Bluefield, this is what I talked about earlier. Do it again. Prove it to me. Last year you held Graham to 10 points and it looked like your defense was really good. And then Princeton comes in and they kind of move the ball offensively at will. I'm curious to see what answers Bluefield has, if any, defensively. Princeton's a different team offensively this year than what they were. Obviously, they have Nate Tanner, so things are a little bit different. The speed moves a little bit faster as far as when they snap the ball. But skill wise, it's different. This Princeton team doesn't have Daniel Jennings. They don't have Markel Lowe. So there aren't as many options that's like, okay, like these are three guys, I don't know if we have any, like, I don't know if we could take any of these guys out. Whereas now, a lot of opposing game plans for teams is going to be, okay, how can we stop Brad Mosser and worry about the rest? And, for Capital, I don't think that worked out pretty well. Princeton did a good job of getting him in the slot. Obviously, he ran the ball. He had 10 catches for 166 yards, which is really a monster game. He was probably my runner-up pick for Player of the Week this past week. But I'm curious to see how Bluefield tries to approach that. Do we try to bracket Mosser and see how, we can handle that? Or, if we're Princeton, what are we going to do on offense? Or are we going to try to game plan about getting somebody else the ball? Are we going to try to run the ball? And, if they're going to bracket it and take it out of the box, we run right at them. So there's a lot of chess pieces. I guess it's just kind of a chess match. I'm curious to see how it goes. And then obviously there's the offensive side for really both of them. I think you get two of the top three quarterbacks in the area. I think, whatever order you want to put them in, Chance Barker from Princeton, Max Simpson from Bluefield, and Brock Green from Independence are probably your top three quarterbacks in the area. Really whatever you like. It kind of depends on that. They have different styles. Barker and Simpson are somewhat similar in that they're precision passers, while Green is a fun wild card in a lot of senses. But yeah, I this is a really interesting matchup for me. I'm curious to see how much Bluefield has closed that gap, if any. Because again, this is very difficult. It's a gauntlet of a schedule to start, and I just want to see, if you're Bluefield on offense, how do you try to attack that defense, which is really good. Yeah, just really a lot to take away from this game. If you're Princeton, you obviously have more to lose. If you're Bluefield, you win this game. This is I mean, you vault right there into title. I think they're already in title contention, but now like you're battling for that 1-2 seed. You feel pretty confident about yourself. But it is at Honeycutt. It's tough to go on the road. It's going to be another one of those environments. The Bluefield Princeton game it's not Graham Bluefield, but they usually pack Honeycutt Stadium on both sides pretty well. And Princeton's community support is pretty prolific, and they like beating Bluefield. So this is a game that I'll actually be at on Friday. So I'm very curious to see how it all turns out. Want to move on to another rivalry in Greenbrier East Beckley. This is another one. Greenbrier East gave up, I believe, 27 points to Riverside. So I'm curious to see, defensively, can you hold Beckley in? And then this year, can you protect? They had trouble protecting the quarterback Brody Hamrick last year, and it cost them. Greenbrier East was never able to get their offense off the ground, and their passing offense struggled a little bit. Well, I didn't get to see it, but statistically they struggle. I think it's probably a better way to say it because that might just be some execution errors. But I believe Brody Hamrick was 5 of 14 last week. But on the other end, I want to be like, okay, like AJ Godfrey ran the ball for almost 200 yards. Maybe it was just one of those nights where you lean on the running game. Is that real? Is that something that's sustainable? How has things improved for Greenbrier East? And I think this is a good test to see exactly how. I mentioned that earlier, but Bluefield has those, not Bluefield, but Beckley has those two monsters, and H.A. Thomas and Preston Clary in the secondary that they can wreck you. And then you have Jamarcus Mans up front of the defensive line. So if Greenbrier East can't protect, it could be another long night. But we'll see how it goes. I think that depending on how the pace of this game goes, it could be a fun shootout. I don't know if it'll get there, but this could if you get Gage Price and Brody Hammer going, this could be really fun. And again, Greenbrier East, this is a game for them where they have more to gain than what Beckley does because Greenbrier East is AAA now and Beckley's in Quad A. But again, this is a rivalry as old as time. It's fun. There are going to be a lot of fun skill players there. I mentioned Thomas and Clary. Greenbrier East has Nate Tuttle, who's probably had one of the better testing camps this past offseason in the state. He's a state track contender every year, so he's going to be hard to guard. They have Grant Burdette, good tight end too, and Braden Brown. They have a plethora of weapons. It's just whether or not they can get the ball to them in positive situations and go from there. So I'll be curious to see how this one turns out, and not just like the final result, but how the ebb and flow of the game goes. Is Greenbrier able to get their offense off the ground, or do the Flying Eagles ground them again? Want to move on to Jameson Rowe and Shady Spring. Shady with a 40-0 win over St. Albans. They were able to run the ball really effectively. Caden Helmer and Blake Snodgrass, I think, ran for over like 300 yards combined or so. Extremely, extremely good game for those guys. And for Shady, you start off on the right foot. Talked about Jameson Rowe going to Williamstown and getting a win. If they can do that again against Shady Spring this week, that's massive. Like I said, these double A teams, they want to steal these games early in the year. Get these games that can get you the points, get those higher seeds if possible, because the schedule is so grueling. You never know who's going to be hurt, who's going to be available for what games. You're working with smaller rosters. So if you can get these games, like, okay, like we can get this here, we can get this AAA game here, that means a lot. Now for Shady, they didn't throw the ball a lot last week. They didn't need to. They ran the ball so well. It's like, all right, like why even bother with it? And Vince Colacerto's shown, yeah, hey, if it's not broke, I'm not going to try to fix it. So they didn't have to throw the ball a ton. I'll be curious to see. I think they'll probably try to run the ball. If it worked last week, let's go ahead and give it another try. Now for James Monroe, they've shown that they can do a little bit in the passing game. I'd be curious to see if that's how they attack. Shady Spring is replacing some defensive backs. I think they lost 15 or 16 interceptions from last year's team that graduated. And if you're James Monroe, you feel really good about the receivers you have. Bryce Gardner had the screen pass touchdown as a receiver, and then Caden Hines, I think is he's about 6'3". He's one of the harder players to defend. Even in 7-on-7s, he was able to get open. Some of the ones I saw this summer, so he's a really good player. And I'm curious if James Monroe's like, okay, we feel like maybe we can attack that secondary that's a little bit younger. And when I talked to Shady Spring head coach Vince Colcerto in the offseason, he said, that's where we're going to need some younger players to step up. We're going to be starting younger players back there. So I really want to see if that's where the Mavericks kind of hone in. It's like, okay, if we can find number 11 on the field, that's weakest link. Is the weakest link in the secondary? Is that something they can expose? I'd love to see how this one plays out. Because if you're James Monroe, it's just kind of a jackpot. You get the Williamstown win, and I think Williamstown's going to get you points because I think they're going to win some games. And you get Shady Spring, which is AAA points, and that matters a lot. And if you're Shady Spring, you kind of have to stay on schedule here because you're in a competitive AAA field. You're trying to keep pace. You did get a win against St. Albans, and I don't know how many points you're going to get from that because St. Albans has really struggled. I think they've been a 1-9 or 0-10, or I don't think they've won more than 3 games recently. So I don't think they've been above 500 in 15 or 20 years. So you're going back a long ways there. Uh, yeah, a lot on the line, I think, for both teams. But if you're James Monroe, you're probably playing with house money a little bit more. Independence and Martins Ferry. This will be a different test. I talked about Independence's pass rush and how good they looked in week one. I don't think they're going to get a ton of opportunities to utilize that pass rush. I watched some Martins Ferry film. They're very stick eye formation. They run the ball. They have a sophomore running back that I think ran for 200 yards last week. And ran for 1,000 yards last year as a sophomore, and I think that was more so in backup duty. So he's good. He's really talented. I've had the chance to watch a little bit of film on him. So that's what Martins Ferry wants to do. They want to run the ball. So instead of getting a lot of those pass rush reps, we're going to line up and stylistically we're going against something a lot different than what we saw last week. So that should be a fun challenge. I'm extremely curious to see exactly how things kind of go from that perspective. Are they able to transition pretty well? Is the defensive line able to kind of get into that? Because you're going to see teams, especially in Double A, that they're going to try to want to run the ball. That's what they're going to want to do. I don't know if they're going to be very successful at it, but I think it's good for Independence to see all these varying different styles of offense just throughout. So that way, when it comes playoff time, if they're fortunate enough to get in, that they're ready for it. And Martins Ferry, again, just watching a little bit of film on them, their line looks good. They run the ball with their running back. They can give it to the fullback, and he can dive and get a couple yards too. They're an offense. They do a really good job of staying on schedule, and it's hard to get them off the field because they're able to, okay, 3-4 yards here. Explosive run with the running back. They don't have a lot of negative plays. So I'd be curious to see how the Independence defense handles this challenge, and are they able to run the ball a little bit more? The offensive line, like I said, did really good in pass protection last week. Now are you able to push the pile for one of the better running backs in Double A and Silas Nelson? Want to move on. I talked about earlier, but Mingo Central and West Side. West Side will go to Mingo Central. Mingo Central has some good players again this year. West Side had to actually come back and win this game a year ago, and I thought it was kind of a turning point for the program. It's like, okay, like we're legitimate contenders for a playoff spot, and that ended up being the case. They got in as the 16 seed, I believe. And again, this year, they'll go to Mingo Central, and I think there's a lot on the line in this game. West Side to get to start 2-0. How much of that success from week one can you carry over into this week? Again, this is still a young West Side team. Malachi King, who had a really good game at defensive line, I think he recovered 2 fumbles last week against Wyoming East. Only a freshman, but you do have Cam York, who led the team in sacks a year ago. He's starting there. He's the leader of the defense. You have those kids back on the offensive line. You have the Sanders kid who didn't really run for a lot of yardage, but I think the thing is you were able to kind of get your quarterback's feet wet. He got a lot of confidence in Braden Waldron. He threw 3 touchdowns. He ran for 55 more yards. So I think there's a lot to like. It's just being able to build off of that and being able to maintain and defensively, can you keep the flow going? And that's really what I'm looking for from West Side. I think this one might fall under the radar a little bit, but I think it has a chance to be a sneaky competitive game. And I just want to see how West Side responds to this one because I think that this is if this is a game that they compete in or even that they win, we have to seriously talk about the Renegades as making another playoff trip, and that's one thing that Coach Will Daniel talked about in the preseason. We're not looking to rebuild; we want to reload, and I think so far after week one, they're off to a good start with that. So week two, I want to see, are you still reloading? Are these kids still coming along? Where do you stand in the hierarchy of Double A? Are you a serious playoff contender? And even if they lose this game, I don't think that means that they're not, but I think it's a good glimpse into where they stand at this point. And the last game I want to talk about is Pikeview Liberty. Pikeview with a big, I believe, 50-8 win over Summers County in week one. They ran the ball really well. And Liberty lost to Dodgers County. It was a tough loss. So I'm curious to see how they respond. Yeah, this is really you hate to say kind of a must-win game for Liberty early on, but they're in a position where you go 0-2. You've Dodgers County I think is a very good Double A team. They're another one I've kind of got my eye on in that playoff picture. But if Pikeview goes 2-0, you're trying to gain ground on. I talked about three other Double A teams that I think are going to be playoff contenders to be in that picture, and Independence, Bluefield, and James Monroe. And you're talking about statewide Dodgers County, Frankfort. You don't want to look too far ahead right now, but those Double A spots are going to fill up quick. And starting 0-2, whenever you have teams like James Monroe still on your schedule later on, that's a really tough spot to be in. And for Pikeview, I want to see if they can continue it. I know they feel extremely confident about the work that they've put in the weight room, and I felt like that reflected really well in their first game. Now Summers County, their numbers are down, but Pikeview was able to still rip off big runs. They had a lot of success. They picked up yardage the way they wanted to by running the ball. I think they had two different guys with over 100 yards rushing, so they have some dynamic athletes. I think this is. I don't want to say it's the game of the week, but I think this has a chance to be one of the most competitive games of the week. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how the result of this one comes out because I feel like it'll give us information on both teams. It's like, okay, like we can kind of keep an eye on Pikeview to see exactly what this might blossom into. And if it's Liberty, it's like, you don't want to hit the panic button after week two, but there are some lights flashing if you lose. So it'll be a really interesting game to keep up with. But if Liberty can bounce back, hey, we put week one behind this. We lost to a really good team. Maybe we weren't as ready as what we thought we were, but now we're back on track 1-1. Brand new slate, all clean. And want to go ahead and close this thing out by talking about our player of the week, Isaiah Conley. I hit on it in the opening of this podcast episode. But Conley was just ridiculous, moved all over the field, 3.5 sacks, and really kind of wrecked Hoover's game plan. He was very just difficult for them to contain and put them in situations where they had to leave their best player, running back Blake Fisher, in the backfield to protect. And he's really just a chess piece. It's like a Swiss Army knife. You can use him on the edge. You can move him into different gaps off the ball. He's going to help Independence a lot this year. I but the congratulations to him, our Lewis Nissan Week One Player of the Week, Isaiah Conley. Just a great game for him, building off a season where he had 14 sacks. You can see a little bit more of that, and probably may not get any this week just because of the nature of Martins Ferry's offense. But we'll see. We'll never rule that out. Definitely a fun week. But I want to thank you guys for joining me today. It's been great to bring the podcast back to talk about some of the more happenings of the week, and we'll do this obviously in more of a weekly format now that sports are back, and we'll talk about different things as we go forward. It won't be all just be football centric. There's volleyball, there's cross country, there's soccer. We have a defending state soccer champion, so we'll get into a little bit of all of it. But Again, just congratulations to the winners of week 1, and I want to thank our sponsors, Princeton Healthcare Center, Raynell Medical Center, and First Community Bank for everything that they've been able to do. Patient with us with this podcast, and I know during the summer it bogs down a little bit, but now we're kind of back in the swing of things, and it should be a lot of fun. So we'll be back next week to recap all the week 2 action and preview week 3.